Hey, FlimsyLunchTray, and welcome to World of Warships for our Friday highlight, which I'm now finally showcasing the newest Research Bureau ship, which is the Tier 10 Premium American Destroyer, the USS Hull, which is essentially a Forrest Sherman, as you see us launch the same torpedoes off like you do get on Forrest Sherman, but there are some notable differences between the two ships. So, I have two videos to showcase you today. Maybe the first one is a little bit more talking about the ship, and maybe the second battle, talk a little bit more about the playstyle, which really can be summed up as taking... If I like playing concealment, ultimately on Hull. You can get down to 6.5, because what I find is when I've tried to go for more of the... maybe more aggressive without the concealment, I don't have other destroyer players necessarily, or maybe even at times teammates to rely on to take out the enemy destroyers, to then kind of open up the way to focus on farming battleships and cruisers, which you're going to see in both of the matches today. So really, Hull revolves around taking out enemy destroyers, anything that's kind of preventing you from pushing in on cruisers and battleships and farming them because you're a gunboat. That's ultimately how Hull plays, but having that decent concealment where you can get her down to 6.5 means that you can actually be aggressive and push in with destroyers, enemy destroyers, and take them out. So you're going to see that actually happen in this battle. You'll see kind of how Hull can handle herself in gun engagements. Now, it might depend on the destroyer you run into, but even though we don't get caught in the best situation taking on the enemy destroyer, which is going to be the Holland later on, you're going to see how we don't do too bad here. So, just as a whole, so you've seen us already pop the engine boost. You do get an engine boost here on Hull. I'm just going to go through the consumables. So part of that gunboat style is you're accelerating, you're reversing. So you can see we're trolling shots from the enemy team. We're already over 200,000 potential damage so far. There's even airstrikes now coming in on us. We also have the defensive AA, which is very helpful. So we don't have to panic, and if we accelerate forward, we can just easily sit and avoid them, which actually this game and the next game we have to deal with Dutch airstrikes, so actually pretty annoying overall. But you do get a potent defensive AA fire to help you out. And then you get this big, massive heal, which is one of the tricks, so to speak, that Hull has at her disposal. And having a specialized repair team that has a 5,680 hit point heal. If you throw the India Delta on, you can bump that heal up to 7,157. Like, that's max hit points per heal. So it's really potent. It helps you, like I've had games I've taken 40 up to, I think, almost 50,000 damage and still had hit points at the end. So your hit point pool with Hull ultimately is massive, and you see us running the Charlie Kilo with Survivability Expert, which brings our survivability up to 29,820 hit points. So you can afford to take hits. You shouldn't be playing. This isn't a Shimakaze. This isn't maybe something more like a Holland or a gearing where at times they have more of that hybrid play, because ultimately the ship revolves around her guns. So let's talk more about the guns, because that's, besides the heal, that's really the big thing, selling point with the Hull, is that wargaming kind of keeps increasing the gun size, caliber size on destroyers. So it's kind of funny when we kind of see how things go so far. When we talk about the main battery, I want to talk about the gun caliber size. I'm going to pull it up on my screen here, and I don't know why I'm not seeing it here. Come on. I just had it pulled up on my screen. So you had something like Trump with 150mm guns. Then you have Lubeck, you have the Hoffman, Elbing, and then you had Ragnar with 152mm guns. And then now you have Hull with 203mm guns. So quite identical to Des Moines guns in that sense. Because these shells do, they're a big thing, even though their overall damage per minute, when you compare them to other ships in the game. So like if I say AP DPM, Hull would rank 10th of all tier 10 destroyers, Harugamo and Marceau and Lucian being the top 3. If I compared her high explosive DPM, she drops pretty hardcore. Like you have something like Marceau, Smolin, Vampire 2, Harugamo at the top. Hull drops down to the 22nd position. But the big point here with her main battery is the amount of damage that these shells do. So as an example, with the armor piercing on Hull, pull up here, you do 4,900 damage. With high explosive shells, you do 2,800 damage. So they're basically, yes, you have 3 200mm guns, but it takes a little bit of time overall to dish the damage out. But you're going to be able to pin, you're going to be able to citadel a lot of ships that, you know, maybe only something like the L-Beam, the Schultz, the Hoffman, Ragnar can citadel at a distance, but now you kind of have more of an advantage with Hull's 2 and 3mm guns, and you're going to see us get some citadels on an aircraft carrier in the next game over 10 kilometers away. So the power of these guns is potent, but the other thing that you end up kind of, because you have a lack of number of guns, right? So if you talk about Marceau, you know, Marceau has 8 guns, and you have 3 guns here per salvo. And so it's very similar to, if you like playing for Sherman, I'd say you probably like playing Hull, where your aiming becomes rather important, right? So you have to be mindful of that. So it is, sometimes you're free looking, like you can see I keep peeking over towards the Prince van Oranje. I want to see what he's doing. I want to see if the Holland pops up. And I'm just trying to set fires ultimately on Montana here. And then if he goes broadside, even at range, I'm not afraid to switch to the armor piercing shells because of how much damage they do, and that they have a pretty good impact speed as well. It's like 460 meters a second, and with that's for the high explosive, and you pin 34mm with Hull, right? Where with the German destroyers like Hoffman, you pin 38mm, and then also Elbing would be among those that pins 38mm as well. So, and you have a lot of 32mm, especially on cruisers. So, you know, something like a Des Moines sitting bow ends, like where you can just sit there and like pin his bow, right? So it becomes more of an annoying threat to cruisers, just like you're going to see with the Prince van Oranje. You have a little more difficulty, of course, with ships in the game that have stronger deck plating, you know, so if we're talking about the Los Andes or like Libertad, you know, that 51mm, I don't remember what Kremlin's is. You have cruisers, heavy cruisers, battle cruisers like Petro, like Stalingrad, that have thicker deck plating as well. So you are trying to be mindful of where your shots are landing. So here I'm RPF located, and I'm hunting for Holland. I know I'm spotted, and then he pops up over here. So Holland essentially gets the jump on me here, and you're going to see that I end up trading a lot of damage because I'm trying to get my rear turrets swung around. So at the start of the engagement, things are favoring Holland, but once we're able to swing our shells around, right, even though we're getting punished, you're seeing we're getting the pins. Now we're going to pop that specialized repair heal, even though also Holland gets a heal. The big thing that's going to help me here is trying to avoid any airstrikes or incoming salvos from the Prince van Oranje. So as we trim down the Holland, our heal is still ticking, and he's going to get his engine boost going, and we're trying to like land the last of the salvos, and then we ultimately get him and still avoiding the Prince van Oranje. So typically if you get into any gunfights with destroyers, cruisers, battleships, the play style the same way that Sherman is that you kind of end up angling away, which makes it easier to avoid salvos. I mean, you can see even though we have a last stand, our engine's knocked out, we have the Fearless Brawler skill, which is basically whenever we're detected, we get a negative 10% main battery reload time buff, and you don't even get smoke, right? So we're something like the Sherman, since we're kind of comparing here, you know, Sherman gets the sim armor piercing high explosive. Here you get high explosive and armor piercing, but then Sherman gets the hydro acoustic search, and then also smoke screen. So you end up kind of exchanging some things, so to speak, here in favor of the Hull. Honestly, Hull would be too overpowered if you gave it a smoke screen and or hydro. Like, I would really like having Hydro, honestly, on Hull, but I think that would end up making the ship a little too strong to deal with. I mean, if you gave it a Hydro, I could see doing like maybe a 3-kilometer hydroacoustic search as an example, right? But that's kind of like, that's more the British gimmick, having that short-range hydroacoustic search. So the ship's pretty potent already. I mean, I'm not going to have high damage games between this game and the next game, but it's really kind of, it's more the average games that I tend to have with Hull. And, you know, we spooked. One of the things that we did when we opened up at the forefront there in the beginning of this game is we were pushing away the Prince van Oranje. We were pushing away the battleship. Ultimately, we killed him just over here by the island, and then we killed the other Montana who tried to circle in between A and Bravo. Is that battleship and cruiser players don't like to stick around and get farmed by gunboat DDs. They drop back. So when I started off this game, sitting up on the top side of Alpha Cap, I wanted to push them back because ultimately I wanted to collapse the flank. So if I push back the battleship, or we get them killed, or if we push back the cruiser, get the cruiser killed, what as I push in, if they still have an enemy destroyer, then I can more isolate that engagement one-on-one. Even though Prince van Oranje took shots on us, you know, we can simply dodge and avoid. We can use our engine boost as well to help us out. So now that opens up, we've collapsed their flank, right? So that's part of... I mean, no one likes it. I mean, even me as a battleship player, a cruiser player, I don't like having a destroyer just farm me at range. So Hull's kind of cancerous in that way. So Prince van Oranje opened up a salvo on the GK. And the other thing you do with gunboats is you kind of like present yourself as this low-hanging fruit. So the GK, he has, this, I think, less than half health. So I want to pull away Prince van Oranje's attention onto me. If I can, because I still have a heal. We've done 51,000 spotting damage so far, but if I also distract the Prince van Oranje, it might open up a chance for GK to get a broadside salvo in, just like that. Yeah, so he's like maybe not even a fifth full health. So it's too much for like that cruiser to be isolated alone. When he tries to start shooting at me, he gets distracted by me, and then like, hey, there's a GK sitting here, possibly with 420s. So talking a little bit more about the AA, one of the things I like to do with destroyers like Hull, if you have a decent potent AA, especially with defensive AA fire, is you turn your AA off, and here you see the Shinano, tier 10 coming in. I pop the defensive AA, I turn off my AA, turn my AA back on, then prioritize the AA, and I'm going to eat his planes up here. I like punishing carrier players like this whenever I get the chance. So right there at the start, we end up getting the 8 kills there. So you do have a potent AA with Hull. I'll pull it up here. It's not like, I don't think it's like, it's not amazing compared to other destroyers in the game. Like, you're not even the top 10 in Hull. You're actually rank 13th. In terms of AA strength, so like Ragnar, Småland, Holland, Harugamo, and Elbing have better AA in terms of AA strength rating than you do. But you do get a 6.9 kilometer AA range, so you can kind of reach out further. And as you saw the Shinano, like, I made life difficult for him when I let his planes come in, and then it takes him longer to get out of my AA range. So I quite like having that longer AA range on Hull. So kind of getting more into, in terms of the play style with the ship, one of the things that's really hard is for me to remember to utilize torpedoes. You often forget, or you're just too busy with the guns. But there is a destroyer here on C-Cap. I've been trying to pay attention to minimaps, seeing who's where. So I tried to tell Shimakaze get back. He kind of closes in on the island. I'm like, oh, you could also use the island as well. But Marceau really excels at YOLOing. So I didn't expect the Marceau. He's going to pop back up here in just a moment. He's just kind of full sending it. And if I'd known he was, I would have slowed down and stayed here to shoot him. So it's a bit unfortunate, but I do also have to be mindful that Stalingrad can get a salvo into me as well. But it does take a Shimakaze torpedo. We want to kill the Marceau. We want to keep our Shimakaze player alive as our friendly Nevsky takes out the enemy Shimakaze. And Island getting in the way, and then Doom is going to bring in a high explosive salvo from Thunder and take the Marceau out. So quick, so fast, we've taken out the destroyer on this flank, and we've lost our then we lost our other Shimakaze, Azure Lane Shimakaze, down at A. So I mean, honestly, a lot of destroyer players in the game lack patience. So typically, the ones who lack patience are the earliest to die, and so that's exactly what you see happen here. And then because the DD died already, we can just push in, and we can farm the Stalingrad. Now, there's not a strong presence from the enemy team up here. Like, this is one of those random weird tier 10 matches where it's like, this is actually a 10v10, it's not a 12v12. So we're lacking hit points on the board, if you will. But there's 5 of us up here at C. So I actually decided to take an aggressive path into C. We don't know where the Stalingrad has since gone, and then he resurfaces here. And I want to flip the cap first before I open up. I can utilize the island as well here if I decide to shoot. Yeah, and I do decide to shoot. And then I'm like, okay, well, actually, we're only 3 seconds away from the cap. So I just go ahead and take the cap. We still have a minute on our engine boost. We get some fires going. So Stalingrad is really weak when it comes to fire. We're going to slow down, pull in, juke the salvo. And then we're going to see if we can get some more fires going. And since Doom's in Thunder, I'm just going to be working with him to basically the goal now is we want to overwhelm the damage control party. We want to overwhelm the heal on the Stalingrad. And I'm going to keep pushing it on the Stalingrad because for me, there's no need to... Like, I would like to play selfishly and just sit back here behind the island and just farm him. But the longer the Stalingrad is alive on the 10 line, the longer it takes my team to come out of C down into the enemy spawn. And I want to do some work in enemy spawn. So here, broadside Stalingrad, we're going to switch to armor piercing. 19,000 is where we were. It says 21,000, 22,000. So we're getting some mixes of some overpins and some non-penetrations. So we end up doing like 5,000 there just between the armor piercing alone. And then I'm going to push back in again. I think I do take the engine boost mod in the second slot to have a longer action time on the consumable, as that's nice ultimately to run, because we don't get a lot of consumables with Hull unless we take Superintendent to get the additional defensive A, heal, and defensive A, heal, and engine boost. So we basically now we're working wearing out the Stalingrad. Our team is, it's still a close game. The enemy team has more points because they've flipped Bravo. And I'm looking down. Part of like your play style with, I mean, any ship in World of Warships is you kind of want to make pre-decisions. So like I'm already deciding what am I doing next after the Stalingrad's gone down. And I have to also have the map awareness. I have to have the situational awareness. That CV's coming back in, the Utrecht, that's going to be some AA strikes, high explosive air strikes we're going to have to deal with. So I'm going to work the AA, trying to help protect my teammates, running cover for them, and then we're just going to open back up here on Stalingrad. So he has Kuznetsov, he was, I think, on a permanent fire, but Kuznetsov went off, and then he's broadside Napoli, and Napoli takes him out. So now we're going to switch to the Montana and the Utrecht down here. And what I actually ultimately would like to do in this situation, because they also have, I think there's another battleship that ends up coming over here if I remember right, is I just want to set fires. I want to farm damage, if you will. So Shinano's coming back in with his planes. I have my engine boost and I'm waiting to use it. So I'm going to wait for him to come in. And then when he thinks he can confidently get me, we're just going to pop our 15% engine boost and avoid it. And then we're also avoiding the airstrike from the Utrecht. There's torpedoes that were coming in from Bravo. So it's a good thing, of course, we didn't keep sitting there. We'll bow on to the second strike of the Shinano coming in. So we're going to see if we can find the window here. And we're good. So there's a lot of value in having the Fearless Brawler skill because we're also building into the gun range on Hull as well. So we're doing, it's like 14.76, so like 14.8 is what you see on the minimap. Because, you know, we have 203s, and it doesn't take, if you notice, like, compared to the other American destroyers that typically have the 127mm guns, it doesn't take very long for our shell travel time. And here I'm using my propulsion. I'm baiting Utrecht. So he thought he had me locked back in, and then I just like pull back forward, put the island better between me and Utrecht, and we're all good. So the Montana is going to be leaving our gun range. So this is, again, this is that kind of effect you end up having on battleship players, particularly, because they don't like being farmed. So we're pushing him away. We're maintaining map control. That's one of the things that you can do with hull that you tend to do with gunboat DDs. Like, you know, they don't have a destroyer to screen for them to get in close and try to take us out. They don't have a radar cruiser to deal with us up here right now. So we get to be a bit of a bully, is really how you can define the hull. And I think the GK took a salvo at us there as well. So we actually have, what was it, 850,000 potential damage, but I've not even used a heal. And we've only lost a little bit of hit points. So we want to reset ourselves back up. It's usually nice if you can maintain your gun range with the enemy ships. But as you see, I kind of naturally you find yourself with hull kind of sitting in this kiting out position when you're dealing with the enemy team. Because you're a larger destroyer, like one of the weaknesses of the hull is that she's quite clumsy. I mean, one, she's a larger destroyer, so to speak, but she doesn't have an amazing rudder shift. So if I was going to go for, if I didn't want to go for a full conceal build, like let's say I even gave up concealment on the 5th slot, I'd probably go for steering gears mod 2 to bring down your rudder shift time. Because I think when we look at the rudder shift time, let me pull it up here. It should be under general. Rudder shifts. So you have the 10th worst rudder shift. But it's 5.3 seconds. Like, it's the same as for Sherman. So that's, again, if you're like, do I want to make that kind of investment into hull? I'd be like, well, pick up Force Sherman for Cole first. See how you like playing Force Sherman. And then you can end up, if you like it, then you can get the hull if you really want to. That's how I would approach it ultimately, in my personal opinion. But there's sometimes there's a lot to be desired, maybe to have a slightly better rudder shift time. And that's part of when I was talking about if you turn out, you're more battle in, and then the enemy, like the Montana's pushing back in, the GK was kind of pushing back in. When you present a large broadside, you can take quite a hefty salvo from the enemy team. So I tend to like to try to play more in this kiting out. And I'm also trying to circle around now to get on the side of the Montana. I would like to be able to switch to my armor piercing. We've set 6 fires so far, but we've had a difficult time with battleship players constantly DCPing a couple like 1 fires. So that's frustrating. And here I'm like, I want to switch to the armor piercing because I thought maybe he's going to keep turning out. And I think he ends up turning back in here. And you see that actually overpins with our armor piercing on the Montana superstructure. So we're just going to end up switching back to high explosive again. Yeah. So then we get another fire going. So then we're going to have that ticking permanently now. But he's pretty low, and it's not going to take too much more. And we flip back to the armor piercing again. So you will be switching between armor piercing and high explosive a lot because, I mean, these are 203mm guns. So, like, you're going to see a pretty good example of the armor piercing when we push down into the aircraft carrier. Because I realized Montana's getting low. I need to go ahead and get turned back in because I want to farm more planes from Shinano. I want to get more base XP, be sweaty in that way. But I also want to provide more AA cover for the Napoli, which... I end up in this game, I'm going to have chat blocked out because there's a lot of players cussing this game. And the Napoli's behavior has been like unsupporting. He's been rather self-focused this whole game. So we're going to push back in. We still have a defensive AA. I don't want to use my defensive AA yet because I want to get more use out of it. So the closer we get to the CV, the more use we're going to get out of our defensive AA, because ultimately it's just a 40-second defensive AA action time. And that's usually what the action time on defensive AA is. Like Stalingrad gets a 60-second, but a longer cooldown time. And, you usually don't have a CV in your AA range for that long, ultimately speaking. And of course, Wargaming's like, hey, we should give aircraft carriers smoke screens. So, we catch the Shinano out. He's the last on the team. But of course, it's just going to drag out the game even longer because Wargaming wants to protect their precious class. So, what are we going to do? We're going to push in here. So I'm going to reshift my position because I want to get more, again, on the side of the targets I'm taking on, because we do have a potent AP. Like, it's kind of the same like with Druid or like Elbing. Ultimately, you want broadside. Like, that's where you get a lot of your damage out when you're dealing with cruisers, battleships, and even like aircraft carriers. So you're going to see, a lot of times you might fire an armor piercing from like 127mm like gearing, and like we're getting very little damage. Or like here, we can actually punch through and we can get citadels, and we're getting like 4K, 5K AP salvos just from the hull alone. And we have our last defensive A there going. So a little short of the AA expert, because I think we need 35 for that. But we're going to land with a nice 147,000 damage game with just the 1 destroyed, 30 planes shot down. 2 and 13 target hits, maybe a bit low. Honestly, you can get much more out of this in terms of the reload time. I think I have to double check. It depends on how you do the build. If you don't have Fearless Brawler going, I think I'm sitting on a 3-second build, roughly. We'll do an upgrade commander build video tomorrow. But here you see the base XP of 2,100, and our Nevsky had a really good game, working some Nevsky magic down at the other end of the map. So good on him. And then we're going to go into the detailed report. And we only did, 28,000 spotting this game, even 50,000 potential damage. I've had games higher, I believe, with having more potential damage with hull. We only took very little damage this game, so we didn't get to farm Adrenaline Rush very much, unfortunately. Fires was 38,000, and then you saw the AP high explosive breakdown. And then with premium count, it was over 600,000 credits all said and done, I think with green boosters running. So so that's the hull. I quite like hull. A little bit of a different play style than Sherman. Sherman you can kind of mount up, sit in your smoke, use your hydroacoustic search, where something like the hull, the destroyer that doesn't have in a smoke screen, you put yourself more out there, so it's a little bit more of a dangerous gameplay, but it's rewarding. But it is also cancerous for battleship and cruiser players that have to deal with you, and you're just kind of avoiding their salvos when you're playing at that 14-kilometer range. Even if you're playing down to the 12 to 11, it's possible to dodge salvos. It just depends if you got maybe your engine boost helping you out, and throttle juking. You do a lot of throttle juking with hull. So don't be afraid to work your propulsion in that sense. So that's going to be it for today's video. If you liked today's video, give a thumbs up. If you didn't, give a thumbs down. Subscribe if you do want to see more. If you have subscribed, thanks so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you to my Patreon supporters. Until next time, take care.